Hi, I'm Caroline Stocks from Pig Health Today, and with me is Megan Pearden, who's an Assistant Professor of Clinical Production Medicine at the University of Pennsylvania. Megan, thank you so much for joining us. Now, the 5 freedoms have long been a pillar of animal welfare. What's different in the world today in terms of animal welfare?
There are some things that are new now that we didn't really discuss before. And one of those things, when we really think about the 5 freedoms, is that we have neglected to think about positive welfare states. And so that's really been a shift in the focus of animal welfare science, is from thinking about how we prevent suffering to how we really provide an actual positive state for those animals.
So what's our actual obligation then to animals in terms of their welfare?
I think that's a challenging question, and I think a lot of that comes to us from consumers and what our consumers are asking of us. And I think it also brings us back to that positive welfare, because our consumer wants to know that our pigs are happy. And that's really challenging us from a scientific perspective. How do we measure happiness? But that is something that the consumer wants. And so we need to figure out how we can meet that obligation, because an obligation is really ethical, right? It's really a moral question. And so that drives our science. Obviously, it doesn't determine the outcome of our science, but it drives kind of where we do science and what questions we ask.
So how do we measure welfare then? How do we know whether the pigs are happy?
So there's a lot of different ways to measure welfare, and typically we divide it up into 3 different realms. So we think about the functioning of that animal. So what is going on? How productive is that animal? How many babies is that pig having? But then we can also look at 2 other things. We can look at the behavior of that animal. Is that animal able to express all of the natural behaviors that it would do if it were able to do whatever it wanted? And then also, what kind of emotional state is that animal in? And so when we do science, we really try to make measurements in all 3 of those kind of bubbles. And then where they overlap, that's kind of how we think about where is the welfare of this animal.
So how well do those measurements actually work then? Can you be sure that you are actually checking whether a pig's happy?
And that's why we kind of try to do it in multiple realms, right? Because sometimes if we only measure in one realm, we might get this measure and we might say, wait, we don't know if that's good or bad. But by measuring in multiple realms, we can say, okay, well, this could be either positive or negative, but when we combine it with our physiological measurement, it's kind of telling us that it's negative. And so when we combine all of those things together, it really helps us understand, are we on the good side or the bad side or somewhere neutral when we're talking about assessing welfare.
So what does make a pig happy then, and what needs to change in terms of production?
That's a really challenging question, because there's a lot of things that that we do to make pigs happy today, right? We keep them healthy, we put them in biosecure facilities so they don't get exposed to disease. And a lot of what we focus on is kind of that functioning bubble, so making sure they're productive and healthy. And then I think the advancements that we're really thinking about for the future are things like, how do we allow them to express more of their natural behaviors? So, if pigs really like to manipulate the environment with their mouth, how might we do that? If pigs really like to interact with other pigs, how can we provide that in the farm of the future?
So which areas of pig production then have the potentially biggest welfare challenges?
A lot of it always comes back to housing, right? So how do we house these animals so that they're safe and healthy and free of pain, injury, and disease, but also have those opportunities to manipulate the environment, thermoregulate, so if I'm hot, I can sleep over here so I can cool off, and associate with pigs in a friendly way, but not in a way that causes increased aggression or other problems like that. And so a lot of it comes down to housing and how we manage those housing systems.
You touched a little bit on enrichment earlier. What other measures and what types of enrichment could potentially have an impact on welfare?
So a lot of times we talk about enrichment, we really get bogged down in straw, because pigs really like straw. When we do studies, they like it, but it's really a challenge because straw does not fit very nicely in our current production systems. It clogs up our manure pits, and it's really not very biosecure to deliver. But there's other things we can do, and so one of the things is point enrichment, which is where we provide some sort of enrichment that the pig can manipulate with its mouth, and sort of satisfy that need to manipulate something, but without without necessarily the provision of straw. Ropes, in Europe a lot of times you see wood blocks, but those may not be the best. But yeah, some of those things. And then enrichment can go all sorts of directions, right? We have things like cognitive enrichment, a study where they allowed piglets to be able to learn to change the temperature of the room, and then they could control the temperature of the room. So that's a very different way of thinking about enrichment, right? But it might actually be beneficial to the farmer, because a lot of times actually at night, those piglets turn the temperature down because they were sleeping near each other. And so they turn the temperature down. And if we're turning the temperature down, we're using less fuel. And there we've provided this sort of cognitive enrichment for the piglets, but the farmer is also probably saving money and good for the environment by using less fuel. So enrichment can run the whole gamut, and I think we need to stop being like totally stopped at straw and think about what are other things that we can do that pigs could find enriching that don't necessarily make our manure systems really unhappy.
Yeah, of course. That sounds really interesting, really high-tech approach there. What other kind of precision technologies are being looked at?
When we think about technology, I feel like, again, that's something the industry could really latch onto and use. And one of those things is precision livestock farming, which is basically borrowing methodologies from process engineering and using those processes in the pig world. So for example, putting microphones in pig barns and then generating computer algorithms that take that sound that you're getting from the pig barn and turning it into something meaningful. So something meaningful for welfare might be, oh, there's stress vocalizations going on. That means something is not right. I need to check this and this. Ooh, the computer already checked it for me and it told me that the temperature is too high, and it's either changed it itself or I've taken some sort of action remotely to be able to change it. So some of those technologies are really advancing and could totally give people the ability to improve welfare using technology.
What does the future look like in terms of pig welfare? What advances are going to be made in the next couple of years?
What I really hope is that we start as an industry incorporating some of these things that are coming along and then including those in the way we assess and audit facilities. So when we look at a facility, and right now we're making sure that these negative states aren't happening, I hope that we'll start trying to include some of these positive things, which would then incentivize the industry to include those, but I think also be very rewarding for our consumer to see that, oh yeah, we're not just making sure they're not hurt, we're also making sure that they have opportunities to do these positive things that pigs want to do.
So what developments need to be made then? Is it in the technology? Is it in understanding the pigs? Or is it just actually in the management of pigs?
I think the things that will get the most uptake are the technology. So things like genetics, where we're maybe able to breed for better welfare. So moms that take better care of their piglets, piglets that survive better. And then also with the precision livestock farming, the algorithms that will take all that information, because there's no person who could listen to all those sounds and make sense of it, right? Or, see all those temperatures and make sense of it. But those computer algorithms might be able to do things like tell us 10 days earlier that a sow is sick and that she needs attention. And I think that's where a lot of the kind of most rewarding science will go, because I think that's probably the most likely science to get sort of absorbed by the industry, because it's kind of that win-win science where the industry gets to make sure that sow is happy and healthy and that she stays in the herd longer. And so it benefits the pig and it benefits the farmer.
So obviously technology, it's great in theory, but can often be quite an expensive solution for producers, especially if margins are quite tight. What would be your kind of top tips for farmers who are thinking, right, I do want to improve my welfare, but I don't necessarily have a lot of money to invest?
Well, I think, again, that's really thinking about housing and kind of what type of housing as you go into the future can really make those animals have the best welfare. And can I do something simple like provide ropes to my pigs so that they can, do something to manipulate their environment? And that's really low tech, but it's something that, it makes the environment more interesting, and it also gives them that opportunity to express a normal behavior. And right now, that's not part of any of our assessment or auditing programs, but things like that, I think could be very low cost and easy solutions that people could implement relatively soon.